This is where I dropped the ball entirely. Making anything artistic / creative is painful. It is difficult. The reason being is making art is cyclical, as I've said earlier. It's a lot of iteration. It's a lot of people challenging your ideas. It's a lot of you challenge your own ideas, right? You keep making choices and you start wondering to yourself, am I making the right choice? And, I feel like the overall answer is yes, because designing is just making the right choice constantly, right? And let me expand on that. How does one actually make the right choice? Like, which castle are we going to? Going to the left that's sunny, the one that's dark and gloomy? Could be any of the two. How do we know which is right? My overall opinion is you just need to make a choice. It doesn't really matter. And here's my line of reasoning. Creativity / innovation is rooted in choices, right? Choices are real. Indecision is not real. So you need to base your work in reality to make the right choice. The right choice reveals itself when you A, execute a plan, or B, make the wrong choices until you learn what makes the right ones. In essence, you shouldn't be afraid to make choices or waste time. You should just keep going until like you've arrived at something. Even the time that you feel is wasted can be useful in some other way that maybe you're not aware of or hasn't revealed itself yet. So if you're like, I don't know how to make UI sounds, it's like, yeah, so does like everyone else. Just like do it, man. Trust me. I think another aspect of this is that like because UI is abstract, there are no real correct answers necessarily. There are just correct questions. I used to start off in Loddlenauts being like, how can I make a cozy UI sound? And when I started trying to do that, I was like, oh, this is too broad of a question. There's too many answers. It doesn't actually have a link to my original question. Instead, I would start trying to ask myself, like, why is Nintendo's UI so satisfying? And I'm like, oh, it's tactile. What does tactility mean? It means using clicks and buttons and objects that like are very clicky or buttony in nature, And that gives me a smaller space of the blank canvas to kind of define and use and figure out. So this is my next point. When it comes to designing UI or abstract UI, I think it's very useful to kind of have a method. And beyond that, you should have a method that lends itself to the kind of approach that you're trying to go for, right? So if the answer you're looking for is abstract in nature, use a method that makes developing abstract material easier, not harder for yourself. These are the two kinds of approaches I generally see people using in the broader sound design community, myself included. The first was goal-based session, and this is a very linear artistic creation process, in my opinion. And it's when you do something like, I'm going to sit down for an hour and I'm going to assign 40 minutes to designing and 20 minutes to mixing and editing. And you have a very specific goal in mind for yourself. Like, I'm going to make some like really cool swell or sting or something like that. That's perfectly fine. But if you're still in the exploration phase or like you're still trying to figure out what it is that you can do for this particular sound, or it's like not vibing well with people, I try to then lean into being more thematic in nature. And I think these thematic soul sessions are like very useful in that sense, where like you're essentially having a jam session where you have 4 split sessions. You split them into 15 minutes, you make 10 minutes, set aside 10 minutes for design, and then 5 minutes for cleanup. The usefulness in this activity is that it's multi-pointed artistic creation, and that you can expect to come up with like a lot of ideas that then later you can maybe arrange. So for instance, if I was making a kind of select sound, I would go along this process, give myself some abstract design goals and be like, okay, this select needs to be very clicky in nature. This one, I'm going to try and squash whooshes into transients. This other one, I'm going to use a synth to make everything. And I go along that process and come up with a bunch of output at the end. I'm like, okay, I really like this material, or I like this specific idea I came across when like handling this idea. Let me try and bring that into an overall design. I think what's important for this kind of source session is that you try to treat the sounds with as much care as possible. If you want this material to be useful at the end of the day, you need to do a lot to kind of make sure it's like easily useful, because it's not fun, for instance, to have a whole source session and then like it's a whole sausage file and you can't actually pick it out or use anything. It's a lot easier if like you've correctly named or organized all of this information so that when you're like, I need a transient of some kind, you can go to your transient library and just put that into your sound as quickly as possible, you know? And then I suppose staying focused while exploring is another key point of trying to have these thematic source jam sessions where you tell yourself, you know what, no matter what, I'm just going to make transients. I'm just going to make swells. Do your best to not get distracted and do your best to make something that's interesting and then move on from that idea entirely after your 15 minutes. And yeah, to close off, these are not hard and fast rules. These are just like ideas to like, I don't know, get you going. This is not like how I approached it.